Hey guys, this is the Casual Fan, and in this video, we'll be rating the 20 drivers for how they fared in the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now, we just had the Hungarian Grand Prix on Sunday, and well, just like every other race in the last few months, it was won by a Red Bull and by Max Verstappen. Now, the race was interesting in parts. There were some parts that were actually a bit surprising. To put it simply, there were quite a few battles. Well, we had a battle for P2, P3, P4, even at the end of the race. So, yeah, not a boring race, to be honest. There were quite a few things which probably a McLaren fan would love to keep an eye on. A Lando Norris fan would be happy to see how things are going. Not a drag in any which way. A fun race. But yeah, in this video, we are not here to talk about all of that. We are here to primarily talk about the 20 drivers and see how they fared at the Hungarian Grand Prix. So without further ado, let's begin. First of all, let's take a look at Red Bull. And at Red Bull, first, let's start with Max Verstappen. Now, first of all, talking about Max, well, this was his 7th win in a row. That was not a big surprise, to be honest, with the kind of dominance that Red Bull has had this season. However, there's one thing that we could see again, and that is the fact that Red Bull has its weaknesses as well. In qualifying, Red Bull is not the dominant force that it is in races, and that was there to see for everyone. Max, well, he lost out on pole. Arguably, it was not his best lap. He was, and that is something that I think it pissed him off a bit, because what we could see was him not being entirely happy with starting P2. Then we moved to the race, and one thing that was quite decisive was how he made sure that he would be aggressive, but he would not go overboard. That is something that we've seen in the past. On the other hand, we've seen him being ultra cautious as well. In Australia earlier this season, he was maybe a bit too cautious and shouldn't have been that. So yes, you take all those things into consideration. It was a perfect start. He dispatched Lewis in turn 1, and after that he didn't look back. It was pretty stunning in terms of what he was able to do. And I think what Lewis said on Saturday, where he probably just had a little jibe, where he said that Red Bull is probably getting slower. That comment probably Max probably took it personally, because in the race, something that not many people would have noticed was how Max, he never relented. More often than not, we've seen him get his tires into the window slowly, build the stint up, and slowly build the gap. This time around, though, it was completely different. Once after the first 5 to 6 laps, Max took off, and once he did, there was no catching him. He was comfortably quicker than almost everyone in the field, and maybe it's the car, but again, Perez only finished P3. So yeah, overall, a very good weekend. Now he's at 7 in a row, and most importantly, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 this time around, because yeah, he I dock a point because of how the qualifying was not perfect, at least in my view. Next up, we have Sergio Perez, and if we talk about Sergio, well, again, qualifying in P9 in a Red Bull, a car that challenged for pole position, that's just not done. It was not. Again, he made it to Q3, so you can maybe consider that as a positive, but a P9 qualifying in a Red Bull is just, it's not good enough, and that is something that Red Bull will keep in mind, because once the competition starts catching up, this is going to become a major factor for Red Bull. Now coming to the race, it was well executed. He had the pace. Let's be fair, Red Bull had a lot of pace in hand compared to the competition, and Perez used that to ultimately pick off one driver after the other, and in my view, he should have finished P2 with the kind of pace that he had. So yeah, probably P3 is still good. He gets a podium, a bit of a confidence booster for him, but not the most optimum way in which he would want his weekend to go. So yeah, in terms of rating, maybe I'm being a bit harsh, but in my view, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10. Qualifying P9 in a Red Bull is just not done. Not acceptable in my view. Now moving on to Ferrari, and first of all, let's talk about Charles Leclerc. Now talking about Charles, well, he had a pretty good qualifying in terms of how much he could extract from the Ferrari. Even the race was pretty much optimal. He did the best that he could with the car, and maybe there were some areas where he got compromised. The 9.4 second pit stop was a disaster. He could have probably fended off Russell if that had not happened. Then him being stuck behind Carlos Sainz was unfortunate again. On his side as well, Charles did not have a perfect weekend because he had that 5-second penalty. So yeah, overall, if I look at his weekend, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10. Because again, he left something on the table himself. That 5-second penalty cost him, even though Ferrari was being Ferrari. Now moving on to Carlos Sainz, and well, the qualifying was poor. You cannot be eliminated in Q2 in a Ferrari. It doesn't really make any sense. So yes, that is something that Sainz might need to keep an eye on in the future. Then we talk about the race, and arguably the race was interesting and he did a good job. It wasn't as if he was miles off his teammate. He was there and thereabouts with Charles, probably a tenth or two behind, not more than that. Overall, a decent weekend from him. He finishes just behind Charles, and he gets a rating of 7 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Mercedes, and first of all, let's talk about Lewis Hamilton. Now, talking about Lewis, it was such a feel-good factor when he secured pole position. If you guys haven't checked it out, just go to the live stream part. I did a live watch along for qualifying, and yeah, I was happy. I was happy to see him back on at the top, and it was nice to see that as well. So yes, in terms of qualifying, it was perfect. There's nothing you can find faults in. Then you move to the race, and well, first of all, the start was poor. Losing 3 places at the start, it again, I feel Lewis was being a bit too cautious at the start of the race, and while that kind of approach might work when Mercedes is dominant, it won't work when when the margins are too small. He probably lost out a few places because of that. Then even the race overall, I think a podium was possible. He could have finished the race in P2 if he had not lost positions the way he did at the start, and maybe that's why it was probably a bit suboptimal result from him in the end. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 8 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now talking about George Russell, and well, in my view, the qualifying was poor. There's no two ways about it. Again, Mercedes had a role to play, I can understand, but still he should not have found himself in that position, that too in a Mercedes. That is something that he has to keep in mind in the future. Then in the race, he was pretty impressive. He made a lot of progress from 18th to P6 is commendable. However, I think this is something that he might need to keep an eye on. This season, more often than not, when it comes to the more standout results, it's Lewis that is getting them. It's not George. Last season, it was the other way around. And the first pole, the first win, all of them went to him, not Lewis. This year, it's the other way around. And he might need to start scripting a turnaround, because I don't think there are many that look at him as a successor of Lewis anymore, especially with the kind of performances he's had this season, where he's not shown the kind of evolution that should have been there. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Alpine, and let's be fair, there's not much to speak about the two drivers. For Esteban Ocon, first of all, a strong qualifying in my view. The car did not have pace to do anything more. He qualified in P12, and I think that was the maximum that was possible in that car. Then you talk about the race, and well, it ended on the first corner, so really we can't really talk much about it. Overall, the driver rating he gets is 6 out of 10 because of the kind of job that he did in qualifying, and maybe points are possible, but he was unfortunate for the second time in a row in 2 races. He has now 2 DNFs in 2 races. Actually, Alpine has two DNFs in 2 races now. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10, and a weekend to forget for Alpine and Ocon as well. Now talking about Pierre Gasly, he was the slower Alpine driver. His final lap in Q2 was not optimal. He was able to qualify in only P15. That's not good when your teammate is in P12. And in the race, we all saw what happened. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 5 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next up, we have McLaren, and first of all, let's talk about Lando Norris. Now talking about Norris, the qualifying was very impressive, and I think it was justified for him to be a bit disappointed that he could not secure a pole position. Let's see, maybe his time will come in the future. Now coming to the race, a very well executed race, and he showed the right amount of aggression at the start, and that helped him. If he had not jumped Lewis at the start of the race, he would not have finished ahead of him. And I think that was the key differentiator in him securing a podium and Lewis not doing that. So yeah, overall, in my view, for the Hungarian Grand Prix, he gets a rating of 9 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he had. Now talking about Oscar Piastri, and decent qualifying. He was just behind Lando once again. Very impressive on that front. The race was good at the start. He got the perfect start. He was in P2. From that point onwards, after the first pit stop where he was jumped by Lando, his race kind of unraveled. And I think this will be a learning experience for him, because it did appear, now it's my personal view, I could be entirely wrong, but it did appear that Oscar's shoulders dropped a bit once Lando crossed him. The first team radio after that, where he asked his race engineer to tell him what he needed to do, the tone was not the confident one, and maybe this proves to be a learning experience for him. For now, in terms of pace, he's there. In terms of performance, he's right there. He's also consistent. He does not make too many mistakes. Just learning and getting better in his rookie season, everything's fine. But yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 because ultimately he ended up finishing P5 as well. So not the most optimal result that he could have got in that car. Okay, now next up we have Valtteri Bottas, and yeah, in terms of qualifying, pretty good job. He qualified in P7, but then once again, a poor race execution from him. A bad start ultimately dropped him back, and he was never able to recover. That too in an Alfa Romeo which showed impressive race pace on Friday. Somewhere down the line, Bottas underachieved with that car, and you cannot do that. There are very rare weekends where Alfa Romeo has the opportunities to score points and to score a decent haul. Bottas messed up this time around, and he would be disappointed. So yes, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 6 out of 10. Next up, talking about Zhou Guanyu. Now, in terms of what he did in qualifying, it was sensational. He deserves all the credit. A P5 in an Alfa Romeo, well deserved, and even outqualified his teammate. So everything was perfect on that front. Where it was not perfect was once again there was some issue with his car, something that Joe highlighted. But you have to take into consideration the fact that Daniel Ricciardo too faced a somewhat similar issue with his car. Not in terms of having an issue at the start of the race, but being bumped to the back of the grid on the very first lap. From that point onwards, Ricciardo was able to make a better progress, even though he was under-prepared coming into the weekend. The car was slower, and arguably he was still feeling himself in the car. And that's where you have to question what Joe is doing in Alfa Romeo, to be honest. He is not getting the results that a driver who has been in the sport for arguably close to 30 races now, someone who has that much experience, he should be doing better. He's not, to be honest. And something that is Alfa Romeo's headache, to be honest. They need to figure out what they need to do right now. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 5 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next up, we have Aston Martin. And first of all, let's talk about Fernando Alonso. Now, talking about Alonso, he did a decent job in qualifying. A pretty decent job in the race as well, where he kind of stood his ground, extracted whatever was possible in that Aston Martin, and finished in P9. The kind of chirpy nature that Alonso had earlier in the season, that has taken a backseat because of the kind of issues that the team is facing right now. Let's hope the confident, bubbly Fernando Alonso is back in the future. However, for now, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now let's talk about Lance Stroll. And for Lance, again, the qualifying was poor. You cannot be eliminated in Q2, especially if you're driving an Aston Martin. Then in the race, he made decent progress. He finished behind Alonso, which was good. Overall, yeah, a decent weekend. He gets a point for the Aston Martin, so he actually provides some contribution to the team. Overall, a decent weekend, and he gets a rating of 6.5 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Now moving to Haas, and first of all, let's talk about Nico Hülkenberg. Now talking about Nico Hülkenberg, one thing that I feel needs to be pointed out is that he was sensational in qualifying. More often than not, it is almost taken for granted that Haas is a stunning car over a single lap, but it struggles in the race or in the long runs. Having said that, not many are taking cognizance of the fact that it's only Hülkenberg who is getting the car into Q3. It's not Kevin Magnussen. Magnussen has not done that in a long time. This season, they are 8-2 in qualifying, and the average gap is around half a second. Whatever Hülkenberg is able to do over a single lap with Haas, I think it's getting a bit underappreciated, because I'm not sure that it is entirely Magnussen underperforming. Some credit needs to go to Hülkenberg, and I feel it does not happen too often. So yeah, in terms of his overall race weekend, again, sensational qualifying, reaching Q3, unexpected, especially when his teammate was, I think, P18. Then you move to the race, and it was more or less expected that Hülkenberg will drop places, and he did. He finished P14, so somewhat average weekend. But yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 7.5 for another stunning qualifying. Something, as I said earlier as well, he does not get enough credit for. Now talking about Kevin Magnussen, and I think this season it has become a bit of a trend. Magnussen's weekend, it is following a certain template. He's poor in qualifying. I don't know if he's poor or if he's just performing to the level of the Haas, and Hülkenberg is probably outperforming him. So yeah, in terms of qualifying, it's been a bit bad. There's nothing impressive going on there. Then you move to the race, and he makes some progress because he's starting too low. And more or less, it's a bit of a listless weekend once again from him. Overall, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 4.5. And to be honest, Haas might need to rethink if they want to extend his contract beyond the 2023 Formula 1 season. Next up, we have AlphaTauri, and first of all, let's talk about Daniel Ricciardo. First of all, what an impressive return to Formula 1. I personally did not expect Daniel Ricciardo to do this well. I thought Yuki will have the edge at least at the start of this partnership. Well, that's not the case. First race, Daniel Ricciardo, he ticked all the boxes, mind you. Everything was correct and to the T. Then he went into qualifying and he stunned everyone by reaching Q2, while Yuki Tsunoda was not able to. Then he went into the race, and once again, you cannot fault the guy for the way he drove. Another impressive drive, and it was almost a recovery drive because whatever advantage he had of a very impressive grid position of P13, it was all eroded when Joe bumped into him at the start. And from the back of the grid, he ultimately used a somewhat alternate strategy to make up places and then again finish ahead of Yuki. So yeah, overall a very impressive weekend, and he gets a rating of 8 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Not talking about Yuki Tsunoda, and Yuki will be pissed at how the weekend went. He would not have wanted to ultimately lose out to Daniel Ricciardo on the very first weekend. But well, this happened. The qualifying was not up to the mark. It always comes down to the last laps, and until this weekend, Yuki was more or less on top of it. Again in the race, somewhere where Yuki has held his own compared to Nick De Vries, he was a bit outperformed as well. So yes, something to look back on and probably take this weekend as a motivation to bounce back in Spa and the other races this season. So yes, not the best starts, but he needs to start doing well, because if he does not, it would not be surprised if he also loses the seat at the end of the season. So yeah, in terms of rating, in Hungary, he gets a rating of 5 out of 10 for the kind of weekend that he had. Next up, let's talk about Williams, and first of all, let's talk about Alex Albon. Now, to be honest, a very decent qualifying, not bad. A very, very impressive race. Again, away from the spotlight, Albon was P11, right, knocking at the door of a points finish, and he did that in a Williams which was not supposed to be competitive this weekend. And to be fair, it was not competitive. The driver is putting together some special weekends, and if the rumors to Ferrari are true, well, good for him. He deserves that seat with the kind of drives that he has been putting together this season. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 8 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Finally, talking about Logan Sargent, and Logan has been getting a bit exposed by Alex Albon. He's, at the end of the day, if you are always at the bottom of the timesheets and your teammate is knocking on the doors of points finish, it does not look good. And that is where I fear if Logan does not show improvements in the coming races, or by the end of the season, he might lose his seat to Mick Schumacher. I don't know if it will happen or not, but it could surely be the case. So yeah, in terms of rating, he gets a rating of 4 out of 10 for the Hungarian Grand Prix. So with this, we are done with the entire grid. We've gone through the entire grid and rated the drivers. Now let's take a look at the cumulative rating after the Hungarian Grand Prix. Okay, so now looking at the cumulative rating, first of all, at the top, we have Max Verstappen. Not much of a surprise, to be honest. But then we have Fernando Alonso in P2. For now, just ignore Daniel Ricciardo. He's only had one race under his belt. At number 4, now we have Lando Norris. Number 5, we have Lewis. Number 6, we have Esteban Ocon. Number 7, we have Charles Leclerc. Then George Russell, Alex Albon, and Nico Hülkenberg. Now, what I would actually want to focus on is the bottom 5. At number 16, we have Kevin Magnussen, and it's somewhat predictable. His season has not been the best. At number 17, we have Lance Stroll, another driver that is probably getting arguably the most hate in F1 right now. Then we have Zhou Guanyu, again an Alfa Romeo driver. At 19, we have Valtteri Bottas. Again, it might seem a bit surprising turn of events to see Valtteri so low, but the thing is, his season has not been up to the mark. We can even take a look at the ratings on an every race basis, but that is how he's done this season, and a bit of a surprise to see Bottas in 19th, but that is how he's been. At 20th, we have Logan Sargent, and arguably needs a bit of a turnaround. He had a good race in Silverstone, but still he needs to start beating or maybe even challenging Alex Albon a bit more closely than he does right now, because the gap is too big. So yeah, these were my driver ratings for the Hungarian Grand Prix. Next up, we'll have the preview for the race in Spa. Tune in for that. For now, I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.